I'm Brittany. This is, I almost said Shui This is Moran. And welcome to Gaywatch, where we watch and read gay things. There's currently a poll in the field in the chat, and you've got another couple seconds, maybe like a minute, to vote in it before I end the poll and call the results. Hello. Wow. Did I just entirely blank on what I'm supposed to say at this point? I think maybe I did. We're reading volume 10 of Erha today. We read for a couple of hours, and we usually get through about 40 to 50 pages, and we take a break around halfway through. So we take a break after about an hour. I have not read this series before, and so therefore this is something where I am going to discuss, react, and theorize while reading, so no spoilers are allowed in the chat or the comments for the sake of myself and any other new readers. We have book chats on Tuesdays and Thursdays at 2:15 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for YouTube members and patrons, so that we can talk about what we read in the previous stream right before we read more in the next one. If you're interested in more queer bookish chats, there is an evergreen link to the public version of the Gaywatch Discord down in the description box. And there are also general trigger warnings down in the description, should you need them. Now's when I end the poll and talk to chat. Hello, chat! How are we doing today? How loud are we screaming? How many panic attacks have we had? You know, the same, the usual. After ending the poll, which is very lighthearted, I asked who would be voted most likely to die this stream, either a Shuemong or a Meihan Shui, and I think just by a somewhat narrow margin, the winner is a Shuemong. So we have that to potentially look forward to. I figured it would be a Meihan Shui just because there's more of them. So I feel like the odds are better. Surely she doesn't let all four Meihan Shui live. If all four Meihan Shui live, I'm guessing like both of the Shuemongs are dead. And I can't handle that. You hear me? Meat bun? I won't take to that very well. But it's something you would do. So I had to float the possibility. Now, oh yeah, there were also, even though there was a winner in the poll, a lot of people in the chat abstained and are angry at me for asking such a heinous thing. I don't think I had the bookmark in the right place. No, yes I did. I lied. We are on page 113. There was art on the chapter ending thing last time, so it takes a second. We are on page 113 for chapter 304, which is called Their Previous Life. Which makes sense, because in the last stream, you know, OG Shuemong showed up with the OG Meihan Shuis to try and help this incredibly fucking dire situation. And maybe, somehow, we don't have to kill the greatest love of Chumaning's 2 lifetimes. That's the hope. That's where we get to start for today. This is not my usual hat, so if I'm adjusting it all the time, that would be why. My hat was uniquely suited to being perfectly comfortable the entire time. No other hat has done the same, just so you're aware. I probably just left it in the car, and the car isn't here right now. That's probably all it is. Don't worry about it. I'm just babbling to delay the inevitable, which is unfair to you because we started a few minutes late today. I was looking for the hat. All right, okay. The other Shuemong stood in the raging storm. He opened his mouth and closed it again, the jet of his throat bobbing as he swallowed. The first thing he managed was a courteous greeting. The disciple Shuemong greets Shizun. His voice was torn and ragged. These 5 words contained a decade of unspoken suffering. The instant they were out, all the pain in him seemed to rise to the back of his throat, so bitter he couldn't form any more words. Behind him, Meihan Shui spoke up. Focus, Ziming. The more light-hearted one is telling him to focus. I'm fine. The May brothers of this world looked much the same, save for a greater maturity in their faces, but their spiritual energy was stronger by leaps and bounds. I know you're shaking, but you can't let the flow of spiritual energy do the same. I just saw the younger version of you come into this world. If you're defeated in front of your other self, wouldn't that be embarrassing? Pull yourself together. There he is. It had been a long time since Shui Meng was that impetuous young man. He knew Mei Hun Shui was right. He took a deep breath, and though loath to do it, tore his eyes from Chu Wanning to rest upon Taishanjin. We're not doing well. If I stopped to fall apart at every devastating turn of events, I'd still be on, like, what, volume 3? Who the hell are you? Caged in the blue and red array, Taishanjun narrowed his eyes in threat. Are you in such a hurry to die? Mei Han Shui blinked. What's going on? He doesn't recognize us? Chu Wanning had caught his breath. His mind is gone. He doesn't recognize anyone. Shui Meng couldn't speak. If the mere sight of Chu Wanning had shaken him to his core, hearing that familiar voice, one now heard only in his dreams, brought stinging tears to his eyes. How many years had it been? He didn't dare try to count. He was afraid he'd break down pathetically if he did. Is this how Shui Meng overcomes it? Everything he's learned about Chu Wanning, everything that's going on. Does he get over it because he sees OG timeline Shui Meng being overwhelmed with emotion and gratitude at seeing Chu Wanning alive? Time had passed both very quickly and very slowly. He remembered the first year Chu Wanning had been taken captive at Xisheng Peak, his fate unknown. He'd gone to every sect begging for help. Perhaps he'd been too proud back then. Hardly anyone had been moved by his plight. Later, when the volunteer army finally gathered, he'd fervently hoped to rescue his beloved teacher from the demon's lair. But everyone had thought him selfish and reckless. All of them had eyed him with scorn. Mei Han Shui had been sent to another part of the battle away from the front lines. Shui Meng had had no one. He had gone up the mountain alone. But what had been waiting for him atop it? An unrecognizable Xisheng Peak, a dying Emperor Taishanjin, and the corpse of Chu Wanning, crumbling away within the pond at the Red Lotus Pavilion. It'd been almost 10 years. The man he'd longed to see for a decade had become a corpse, and even that corpse had dissolved into ash in front of him. The last thing holding him up had disappeared. Shui Meng had knelt in the scattering dust and wept like a child. He'd come too late. Too late to even touch a corner of his teacher's sleeve. Too late to hear Chu Wanning call his name ever again. Since then, things had only worsened. Taishanjun had returned to life. Ximing Jing had shown his true colors. They had begun the slaughter, sinking the world into hell. Everyone who'd been dear to Shui Meng was either dead or changed beyond recognition. If he unearthed the jug of wine buried beneath the osmanthus tree in his youth, was there anyone left to share it with him? I can think of a couple of Mei Han Shuis, but I take your point. It took more strength than Shui Meng knew he had to look away from Chu Wanning after 10 years of deprivation. I'm not too late this time, he said. Shizun, let me help you. At this moment, Shui Meng and the Mei brothers from the other world arrived on the scene. Though they knew they might see unexpected faces upon crossing through the space-time gate, running into themselves more than a decade older stunned the three young men. Not ready for this, even remotely. You? The younger Shui Meng yelped. The older Shui Meng glanced at him, eyes filled with envy and grief. He chuckled softly. Nearly forgot. So this was how I looked over 10 years ago. He considered a moment, then pronounced, dumb as hell. He both loves himself the most and hates himself the most. I see what you're doing, Meat Bun. You succeeded yet again. I dislike you. The young Shui Meng had been just called dumb by his own self for no apparent reason. He was still trying to figure out what was going on when a bolt of Emperor Taishanjun's blazing fire came down on his exposed back. He pivoted and instinctively unsheathed Shui Huang to block the blow. Stumbling backward, he fought to recover his balance. He hadn't wanted to use the holy weapon, but now he raised it and charged at Taishanjun with a roar of fury. A sword glowing blue blocked his way. The older Mei Hanshui stepped in front of him. We're here, he said, shooting Shui Meng a cutting look. It won't fall upon you to fight. I mentioned in the book chat today being handed a lot of possibilities on a silver platter when it comes to Shui Mengs and Mei Hanshuis. And the silver platter grows ever larger. Mei Hanshui was facing his own younger self with a smile. It's our mess, so we'll be the ones to clean it up. You won't be needed. Mei Shunjin. Is that right? Oh, yeah, no. Mei Shunjin, you're in the prime of your youth. It'll be a terrible shame if you get buried in all this seething hate and spend the rest of your life as dully as I did. The younger Mei Hanshui was left speechless. Really? That's so funny. The younger Mei Hanshui was left speechless. There's too much going on in my head at the moment. The array they'd used to trap Taishanjun shuddered. Mei Hanshui stopped teasing his younger self. He whirled and shouted, "Watch out! He's much stronger than he used to be." They put a new heart inside him, said Chu Wanning. All three of them flinched. Straining tendons stood out on the backs of Shui Meng's hands. He gritted his teeth. We might not be able to hold out for as long as we thought. Shizun, you have to hurry back and kill Hua Binan. Before Chu Wanning could reply, the younger Shui Meng spoke up. Kill Hua Binan? Why Hua Binan and not this... He didn't know if he should call him Mo Run or Taishanjun or something else. Shui Meng glanced at his younger self. This is a corpse puppet. He's unkillable, but if the person controlling him dies, he'll turn to ash. Also, he paused, transferring the cage spell to one hand with difficulty. A fiery red array lit up beneath the younger Shui Meng's feet. It's not safe here. You're still young. You don't need to be a part of this. Go, back to the attacking army. No, don't! Hey! Despite their protests, the younger Shui Meng and the Mei brothers were surrounded by spiritual butterflies. The spelled swarm whisked the three young men back toward the front hall of Wushan Palace. Thank you! Out of danger, please! We got enough people in fucking danger, all right? Granted, they could have been teleported back to a place that had some kind of unholy whatever there that they now happen across and they die anyway, but shh! Fantasizing to cope. The three brats, hilarious, were no sooner sent off than Shui Meng heard a loud cracking sound. Mei Hanshui went pale. Ziming, the array's going to break. Shui Meng shoved all the spiritual energy he had in the direction of Emperor Taishanjin. He shook from head to toe, straining as if holding the fraying reins of a beast, trying to take the skies. Shizun, go! Chu Wanning leapt into the air, his sharp brows drawn together. He looked at Shui Meng. I'll be back soon. Stay safe. I should be the one saying that to Shizun. Shui Meng clenched his jaw. Don't worry. This disciple is different now. I can hold out. He could. He'd held out for so many years in this world. He'd grown used to surviving, until sheer endurance was the only thing that kept him going. He'd held fast through all those terrible years in the dark. Now that he'd reunited with his teacher, there was no reason for him to fail. All these years, sighed Chu Wanning. You were left alone. I'm sorry. His voice lingered, but he was already gone. Shui Meng finally allowed his tears to fall. For an older man to cry like this was unbecoming. Though the pouring rain hid the tears streaming down his cheeks, his shaking shoulders and red-rimmed eyes were there for all to see. Inside the array, Taishanjin was going mad. Cracks appeared on its glowing surface like fissures snaking across the frozen surface of Heavenly Lake. Just as he threatened to break through, a bolt of red light slammed down on him, binding him again. Taishanjin stared with feral crimson eyes toward the spell's source. Shui Meng held his gaze. Give it up, he said. I won't allow him to disappear before my eyes a second time. He harnessed all his spiritual energy, veins protruding from his neck. His eyes were steely and resolute. Shidi, you used to be the stronger one, but Shizun's here today, and I don't want to let him down. You'd best believe I'll win. Mei Hunshui immediately guessed his intent. Stunned, he knitted his brows and snapped, Ziming, what are you doing? Ferocious flames burst from Shui Meng's back with a sound like a thunderclap. He roared and flung his palms outward. The flames sped along the array toward Taishanjin, slamming through him like a storm of arrows and tangling chains that engulfed him in an instant. Taishanjin's face twisted in pain. He threw his head back and groaned, his explosive spiritual energy faltering. His pitch-black eyes slowly lit on Shui Meng. Taishanjin stared silently at him like a resentful ghost, a trickle of blackened blood leaking from his mouth. Next to his heart, on the left side of his chest, was an old scar where Shui Meng had once buried Longcheng in his flesh. As the spells Shui Meng had created pierced his body, the sharpest spiritual arrow had torn through the exact same spot, leaving a bloody hole in his flesh. Stop! Cried Mei Hunshui, worried and shocked. You've hit the limits of your spiritual core. If you keep this up, your core will... Enough! Snapped Shui Meng. His eyes were pinned on Taishanjin, a Xishiang staring at his one-time Shidi, an erstwhile assassin staring at his tyrant king. These two brothers watched each other, decades of time written in one final stroke. Though Shui Meng's face was pale, the impassioned light belonging to the young phoenix of the past once again shone in his eyes. I, Shui Meng, have trained all my life for this duel. As those words rang out, flames licked the skies like a phoenix shooting toward the clouds. In the inferno, they could almost see a young man dressed in blue and silver armor, his ponytail fastened with a golden clasp. He was shouting for all the world to hear, I want to take first place at the Spiritual Mountain competition. I'll have a holy weapon sooner or later, who cares? In 50 years, no, in 30 years, I'll make the name of Xishang Peak known throughout the world. His eyes were as clear and unblemished as a new sprout, his voice crisp as an early peach. That young man was fearless, undaunted by fate or the heavens themselves as he proclaimed his aspirations to any who would listen. Firelight dyed half the skies around Xishang Peak red. Those scenes of that past crisped in the heat, burning away to ash. All was dead and gone, leaving only Shui Ziming. His eyes shone with determination. I seek not fame or glory, only to be who I once was. That's the end of a chapter. Part of the poll really should have also included, it should have been most likely to die and or shatter their core. That should have been part of it. That was an oversight on my part. Apologies. We're on page 121 for chapter 305, which is called A Divine Martyr for the Demonic Path. Xishang Peak was engulfed in battle. The volunteer army had rushed up to the summit. The vanguard was locked in combat with Zhenlong pawns, while the defensive forces set up barriers and medics darted in and out of the fighting. Thousands of spells crossed in midair, the dark behemoth of the mountains set aglow by the sparks of war. Even in the commotion, Shui Meng's attacks were striking, his bright flames scorching the heavens. When Chu Wanning glanced over in the whipping night wind, his heart twisted with grief. Shui Meng was already drawing energy from his spiritual core. Chu Wanning needed to complete his mission quickly, or Shui Meng would meet the same end as Nangong Se. We don't need to go that far. Rising dragon, come. Holding the talisman between two fingers, Chu Wanning dabbed a drop of blood on the paper and cast it into the air. With a distant roar like the tolling of a bell, the paper dragon of the candle burst through the rain-laden clouds. Chu Wanning, why do you summon this venerable one? Sword-like brows drawn low, Chu Wanning commanded, take me to the end of the martyr's path, quickly. Are we going to? I think I said this in the chat. If the bridge needs 30 more bodies, we could make it so that he needs 50 more. And 60, 70, you know what I'm saying? The paper dragon's beady eyes swept over the blazing lands below. Come on up, it said without preamble. Dragon and rider rushed through the pelting rain toward the farthest reaches of that path paved with the bodies of the dead. From his perch in the sky, Chu Wanning could see the glowing scarlet seam between the mortal and demonic realms, pulsing like blood from an artery toward domains unknown. The mountain's backwoods, so close to the gate to the demon realm, were suffused with demonic chi. Clouds of fiery red and pale violet drifted above them, though no rain poured from the heavens here. The great dragon swooped downward. In the instant it might have landed, it vanished back into its talisman in a golden flash. Chu Wanning's feet touched down firmly on the martyr's path. He took a deep breath and looked up. You came, a cool voice remarked. Shimei stood at the very end of the path, the infernal gate at his back. With Shui Meng and the Mei twins keeping Teishanjun pinned down, Shimei's protective barrier had vanished. He turned his lovely face to slant a glance at Chu Wanning. I expected nothing less. The wisps of hair framing Shimei's face fluttered in the wind. He shifted his gaze back to the demon's gate swirling shadows. The demon gate's swirling shadows. I'm having an internal conniption, it's fine. The space-time gate's been ripped wide open, but rather than hurrying to patch it, you're fixated on stopping us from going home. Chu Wanning didn't take the bait. The 3 forbidden techniques were created by Gochen the Exalted. In the presence of demonic chi, their strength will multiply. It's not that I wish to prevent the butterfly-boned clan from returning. If demonic chi floods into this world when it's connected to the demon realm, the space-time gate will become an even larger rift, impossible to close. Shimei was silent for a moment, then let out a mirthless laugh. It's not so easy to fool you after all. Chu Wanning wasted no more words. Blazing golden light uncoiled in his palm. Yet the instant Tianwen lashed out, a silhouette darted in front of Shimei to block the blow. I won't let you touch him, Mu Yanli snarled, brandishing her sword. Her eyes flashed as bright as her blade's reflection. He's suffered enough. We've all kind of suffered enough. Thank you. Not to play the trauma Olympics, but every other fucking page, this bitch pushed something that warrants an essay of untangling and expression. Mujija, Shimei began. Somehow Mu Yanli had managed to assemble a crowd of hundreds of Zhenlong paws behind her, ready to sacrifice themselves to the martyr's path. Great! Alarmed, Chu Wanning darted forward to attack the horde of pawns, but Mu Yanli swiftly blocked his way. Step aside, Chu Wanning thundered. Mu Yanli scoffed. Why should I? The cultivation realm has never cared for the lives of butterfly-bone beauty feasts. Why should your lives have any bearing on their homecoming? She lifted her sword and swung. Her figure was wreathed in white gold brilliance, terrifyingly bright. Mu Yanli held nothing back. To maximize her combat power, she'd shattered her spiritual core. She may have been generations removed, but she was still a descendant of the gods. The power unleashed from her core was, while it lasted, even greater than Taishunjin's. We didn't need her to go Super Saiyan. For fuck's sake. The might of grandmasters and the righteousness of the great sects, these are all hollow, said Mu Yanli, her eyes cold and hard. For thousands of years, you people have drunk human blood and eaten human flesh. You'll do anything in the name of achieving immortality. Chu Wanning dismissed Tianwen and brought up Huaisha, using all his strength to counter the overbearing spiritual energy coursing through her sword. Not a single drop of butterfly-boned blood ran in Mu Yanli's veins. On the contrary, she was of divine ancestry. Yet this woman was willing to stake her life to help a demonic clan return to their realm. He and Mu Yanli flew like, there's a word I haven't seen before. Lisom? Lisom kites? I'm writing that down. White robes and golden sleeves fluttering. Their every move sliced through the air with murderous intent. As their weapons clashed, their eyes met over a shower of sparks. Meddlesome prick, Mu Yanli spat. Not everyone in this world is as you say, Chu Wanning said through gritted teeth. He had traversed an endless night to stand here, all warmth stripped from him. But he remembered Madame Wrong's kindness of a meal, remembered Lo Shanshan's unwillingness to bring harm upon others, remembered the loyalty of Xishang Peak's disciples to the principle of justice over coin, remembered Chushun carving out his heart to light the way for his people. He remembered the radiant smiles of Yuliang Village's inhabitants and the dignity of Flying Flower Isle's mistress. He remembered how Nangong Se had sacrificed himself to subdue evil, remembered how Li Wuxian had brought others to safety on his sword. He remembered Nangong Changying's serene smile as his figure faded into motes of golden light. This world is so beautiful, he had said. The color of its flowers is enough. There's no need for the red of spilled blood. Now, amidst this unfolding calamity, their shadows seemed to appear before him, even those broken, departed, or forever lost. He remembered Yuwang Shi, too, All those years ago, she'd unhesitatingly paid a fortune to save a solitary butterfly-boned woman at Xuanyuan Pavilion, giving her new prospects and her freedom. I don't think Mu Yanli is going to respond well to nuance for understandable reasons. But this is the difference that I've talked about in the black and white thinking. As understandable as it may be for a person to arrive at black and white thinking, this is what I was talking about. I even think it was in a previous reading stream. It may have been the previous reading stream. They blur together when they're so traumatic. So what? Retorted Mu Yanli. Am I supposed to forgive the sins of the entire realm on account of a few exceptions? Well, no. Now's not the time. And she's not going to be receptive, again, for understandable reasons. But, like, again, there's another essay right there. Hatred roughened her voice, and she struck with renewed venom. My mother was good and kind, but because she was a butterfly-bone beauty feast, my monster of a father ate her alive. Was her life not a life? That doesn't stop. Oh, God. Ugh. There are so many and so many layers to the ethical and moral debate on the table. And I don't know if you noticed this, but I have a tendency to yap. And it's just one paragraph after another is just baiting me into yapping for like half an hour. And I would like to finish this series sometime by 2027. Met with Chuaning's silence, Mu Yanli continued, furious. She was the only person who cared for me, who saw me as a daughter. No one else ever treated me like a human being, not my father, nor the sect elders, nor any of you cultivators. The blood of the gods runs in me, so everyone looks at me like a set of impartial scales. All of you wanted me to snuff out my own selfishness, to free my heart of desires, but why should I? The blaze of power from her spiritual core had reached its zenith. Mu Yanli's figure was wreathed in the white gold radiance of the heavens. The shattering of her core was different from that of mere mortals. Even her eyes and hair began to glow faintly gold. Each of her blows rained down with the force of a mountain's collapse. Absolutely egregiously good, prose aside. She's turning cold. She really did go Super Saiyan. That was a joke, but their blades scraped shrilly, a sharp metallic whine. But sharper yet were Mu Yanli's eyes as she spoke, each word a barb. Chuzongsha, you've never looked into the history of the butterfly-boned clan, have you? Chuaning didn't answer. It's a chronicle of cannibalism. In the past, cultivators refined the butterfly-boned into pills to aid ascension, and now the butterfly-boned are paving their way home with all of you. Mu Yanli raised her sword and swung it with all her might toward Chuaning. Juga, come, Chuaning bellowed. Huaisha vanished, and the Guchen appeared. As its first notes rang out, a brilliant beam of golden light shot toward the heavens, illuminating the entirety of Xishang Peak. An immense barrier opened up before Chuaning, high tongue blossoms drifting over its surface. Mu Yanli's sword crashed against it. He stood in midair, sleeves whipping in the wind as he took in Mu Yanli's hateful visage. Her hatred was not for him, but for the world's injustices, for her mother's tragic end, for her lack of self-determination, for her own trapped existence, bound by her duties. Let them go, she said at last. She had funneled most of her remaining spiritual energy into this final blow, yet it still wasn't enough to break Chuaning's barrier. A line of blood trickled from the corner of her mouth. Her throat was dry, and her sword arm was beginning to tremble. Her core was about to disintegrate completely. Mu Yunli looked up at Chu Wanning. Please, she rasped softly. In her pale golden irises, Chu Wanning saw his own reflection. He scarcely recognized himself. His face was haggard, blank, twisted, lost, simultaneously cruel and compassionate in its emptiness. Let them go home. Chu Shenjin. His reflection vanished, along with the golden light in her eyes. Distraught, it took Chu Wanning a moment to realize why. Mu Yunli had exhausted the last of her strength. Her spiritual core had fully fractured, taking the white golden light with it. A pair of pitch-dark eyes gazed up at Chu Wanning. Her armor was gone. She had no path forward. Never again would she be that cold and proud heir of the heavens. Her eyes, now, were no different from any other woman's. On behalf of her brother, on behalf of the descendants of demons who had opposed her own race, she implored him. Let them go. Please. The glowing sword in her hand had gone dull. It had reached its limit in this furious battle. The moment her spiritual energy ran out, it splintered. I'm begging you. Mu Yunli tumbled from the sky, white and gold robes fanning out like a lotus in bloom. Tianyin Pavilion's totem, a set of scales, glimmered in the night, a bright symbol of justice at her waist. The sound of heaven rings out, thou shalt not covet. The sound of heaven lives on, thou shalt not lust. The sound of heaven carries far, thou shalt not blaspheme. The sound of heaven knows mercy, and thus honors thee. She'd grown up reciting this mantra. Whether she said the words with her eyes open or closed, they were like chains snaking around her limbs. The very first words she'd learned weren't mama, papa, or mama, but rather the beginning of this chant. The sound of heaven rings out. Every day she recited it countless times, kneeling before the statues of the gods in prayer. Thou shalt not covet. Thou shalt not lust. Thou shalt not blaspheme. The sound of heaven thus honors thee. On the first birthday she could remember, her cold and unfeeling father had given her a box of finely crafted clay figurines, painted in vivid hues and dusted with gold. When she'd opened that brocade box, their little faces had smiled up at her. They're beautiful. Her father gazed down at her coolly. Do you like them? I do. Mu Yunli grinned up at him, her heart blooming with warmth as though a firework had gone off in her chest. Thank you, Papa. That man she called Papa patted her on the head and took the box from her hands. Then, right in front of her, he threw it to the ground. The ceramic dolls shattered with an ear-splitting crash. Clay figurines could not speak. Their cracked eyes and mouths were still curved in broken smiles. Mu Yunli stared at them in an uncomprehending daze, before bursting into shocked tears. She reached down to snatch her dolls up from the ground. A white shoe embroidered with an emblem of measuring scales trod down on the heads of those dolls with a sickening crunch. When her father lifted his foot, only dusty fragments remained. Just moments ago, the dolls had been laid out so neatly before her, flashing their adorable smiles. Why? Why did it have to be like this? Wasn't this her birthday present? What had she done wrong? What had she done to anger her father so that he'd snuff out the lives of these innocent little clay people too? The sound of heaven lives on. Thou shalt not lust, the man intoned to his wailing daughter. To love is to lose oneself and lose sight of justice. You are descended from the gods, the arbiter of right and wrong in the human realm. The real present I'm giving you today is a lesson. You must never get so attached to anything as to love it. Every single Buddhist monk on the planet just looked over their shoulder and felt an uncharacteristic spike of anger, and they don't know why. That's like misappropriated Buddhist principles applied violently. What the? They're making her relatable. I too relate to the religious trauma. And actually, not nearly in like the cruel way that it just happened, but dad making a mess of your things. I relate to that in a very broad way as well. Thou shalt not covet. Thou shalt not lust. Thou shalt not covet, shalt not lust, shalt not covet, shalt not lust. The mantra echoed through her mind like a curse. As smoke curled up from the censer, those solemn, majestic words echoed in the prayer hall. The sound of heaven rings out. Countless nights she'd spent beneath her blankets and behind her canopies, clutching her head, lips parted around frantic, soundless screams, yet she couldn't find a way out, couldn't find the answer. What did it mean to have a father, to have a mother? When she'd once reached out to embrace her birth mother, the deranged Lady Lynn had stabbed her with a pair of shears. When her hands were gouged full of bloody holes, Lady Lynn turned the shears on her throat. Thou shalt not covet. Thou shalt not covet. This is reminding me of Nangongsa. We've had a discussion, I believe it was in the book chat, about there being a theme at the core of this that speaks to what you leave for your child to inherit, like the ideals that your child inherits. Hua Binan was set up to inherit vengeance, and Mo-Run was set up to inherit kindness. There's things that get passed down generation to generation. Nangongsa was given a set of values that had a better outcome, even though it was complicated. Muyan Li also got a set of values drilled into her. Yeah, Henry says this is Nangongsa if his mother wasn't good either. Yep. I see what you're doing, Meat Bun. I really fucking hate you. Consumed by agony in the dark of night, she'd knelt alone before the statues of the gods. The words she spoke aloud honored the deities, while within her heart roiled the fervent desire to reduce these statues to powder. Thus did she grow from a girl into a maiden, and finally into a woman. Eventually, thousands knelt behind her, chanting those words that had been carved into her bones. The sound of heaven rings out, thou shalt not covet. Once, shoulders shaking in the throes of madness, she'd fantasized about hacking every last member of Tianyin Pavilion to pieces, then turning her sword on herself. Yet in this darkest moment, she seemed to hear a gentle voice in her ear, sweet and girlish, that sang to her softly. Reeds grow tall, reeds grow high, past rolling hills I meet your eyes. Here on this side lies my home, over there is sea and foam. Muyan Li opened her eyes. Sunlight spilled onto the ground from behind the holy statues. By then, she was already the master of Tianyin Pavilion. Startled, she ran her gaze over the fractured shadows before her. As that voice sang on, they seemed to metamorphose into gently swaying reeds, their cottony seeds floating on the wind. Within the reeds stood a woman, extending a hand to Muyan Li with a gentle smile. Here on this side lies my home. Over there is sea and foam. Mama, Li mumbled. She'd called Lady Lynn mother, formal and proper. She'd only ever called one person Mama. Her stepmother, the nanny who'd raised her from birth. Perhaps others could never understand why she didn't resent this woman for usurping her birth mother's position. But those people didn't know that in the entirety of her austere existence, it was only in those few years with Hua Gui that Mu Yanli had known laughter and kindness, warm embraces and tender affection. Even if she explained this, no one would believe her. The nursery rhyme with which Hua Gui put her to bed was the only song Mu Yanli knew besides Tianyin Pavilion's mantra. The same tune that had once calmed her inner demons had transformed into a refrain that fueled her nightmares. She has been made utterly understandable to me, and I do indeed understand. Will I forgive her for the fucking scale bullshit? Not to mention everything else? No. Of course not. It's complicated. I understand, however. Muchicha. She seemed to hear her brother Hua Binan cry out. Never had she heard such desperation in his voice, but there was only so much she could do. She used the last wisp of her spiritual energy to cushion her landing, but not out of any sense of self-preservation. Gritting her teeth, she writhed like a maggot until she reached the end of the martyr's path. Before everyone's shocked gazes, she gathered her remaining strength. And threw herself onto the bridge. I, Mu Yanli, willingly sacrifice myself to this cause, in the hope that you may return home at last. Shimei pelted over, frantic. But it was too late. Mu Yanli only had time to give him a final glance. She had always been aloof and reserved. Even her skin emanated a frosty gleam. But at that moment, when she looked up at her half-brother born of a race inimical to her own, her smile was beatific. Jia! Her eyes curved into crescents as she fell, face raised to the heavens. That unflappable woman looked up at the remote sky to which she'd prayed countless times. Shalt not covet my ass. A beam of red light shot out of the bridge as her body was engulfed by the martyr's path's scarlet flames. She seemed to hear a sweet voice coming from behind that great portal. It was her mama, fanning her with a little gauze fan on a hot summer's day, singing softly. Reeds grow tall, reeds grow high. Past rolling hills I meet your eyes. Here on this side lies my home. Over there is sea and foam. Pavilion Master Mu! Miss Mu! The supposed pawns on the martyr's path behind her suddenly burst into wails. They rushed toward Mu Yanli, kneeling by the woman who'd used her divine blood to pave the way for a demon clan. She had already turned into the 30th step from the end of the path, her body swallowed up by internal flames. Is anyone else driven more fucking insane by the fact that, having shattered her core and essentially no longer being divine, and her eyes looking like any other woman's, she was set to finally have a normal life? Chu Wanning landed on the ground, fingertips numb. The silhouettes of the crowd swayed before his eyes. He'd assumed these were Zhenlong pawns Mu Yanli had brought, only now did he realize it wasn't so. Their robes marked most of them as personal disciples of Tianyin Pavilion's master, but the tears that streamed down their gorgeous faces were golden. All of them were butterfly bone beauty feasts. Of course they were. Of course. Of course. Of course. Under Mu Yanli's leadership, Tianyin Pavilion had taken in these surviving members of the butterfly-boned clan under the guise of disciples. Mu Yanli had brought them out of the murderous fray so they could go home as soon as the path was finished. Frantic, they threw themselves to the ground where she lay. "Murderer!" One of them whipped around and screamed at Chu Wanning, features twisted with hostility. "You're a murderer! Why do you insist on making us your enemy? Why did you force Pavilion Master Mu to her death?" "If it was forced, it wouldn't have worked. But there's a lot going on right now." On each of those surpassingly beautiful faces were eyes alight with the deepest hatred. Mindless with grief, several rushed heedlessly at Chu Wanning like moths to a flame. Chu Wanning stood in place, the world dim before his eyes. To stave off the feeble spiritual energy of these butterfly-bone disciples was nothing to him. He'd hardly need to lift a finger to erect a barrier they'd be powerless to bring down. Murderer, criminal, Zongsha, savior. Chu Wanning closed his eyes. What was he doing? What could he still hope to accomplish? Mo-Run was dead, space-time was torn, and heavenly judgment was nigh. Mu Yanli had surrendered herself to the demonic cause, and Shui Meng was depleting his spiritual core to keep Taishan at bay. The blades glinting coldly before him seemed to coalesce into a massive, treacherous wall standing in his way. Just as not all the world's inhabitants were evil, not all the butterfly-boned were guilty. But he had to stop them from finishing their road home. Even if all that remained were 29 more steps, 29 more lives. He couldn't allow them to leave. He couldn't allow the gate to the demon realm to open. If it did, divine punishment would descend even more swiftly. Both worlds would be annihilated before anyone could resist. How callous would he be if he allowed such a calamity to unfold before his eyes? He couldn't hesitate a moment longer, couldn't soften his heart even a fraction. Mo-Run's name had been dragged through the mud over 2 lifetimes, and Shui Meng was presently putting his life on the line to buy him time. And that was to say nothing of all those who died unjustly, all those who made up this bloody road beneath his feet. "Murderer! You want to kill us, you want us dead. You'll get what you deserve, you heartless monster." Though his conscience curled in on itself, as if singed by flames, his heart was hard as iron. Chu Wanning's eyes snapped open. He would be the murderer. He had no other choice. Jing. Shimei looked at him across the surging crowd, tear tracks glistening on that face that could topple nations. His eyes were manic, yet oddly empty. As the wind picked up, his sleeves fluttered. He seemed to understand that Chu Wanning had come to kill him. Gold flashed in Chu Wanning's palm as Huaisha materialized once more. Lashing tendrils of sword chi knocked aside the butterfly-bone beauty feasts that were attempting to block Chu Wanning's way, throwing them heavily to the ground. Chu Wanning leapt into the air, eyes cold as a frost-glazed dagger, his blade arcing toward Shimei. Suddenly, the martyr's path beneath them shook violently as great columns of scarlet light erupted from its surface. Several shot up in front of Chu Wanning, sending him reeling back. "Look!" someone yelled. "Up ahead! It's the gate to the demon realm. What's going on? The bridge is getting longer. The bridge reached the gate!" And then a final shriek of joy. "The gate's opening!" Man, I was hoping there was like a procedure or something to the gate opening. I didn't think it would just swing open. Like a back porch on a summer day. Come on now. Shimei looked up, astonished. Where Mu Yanli had died, a pale golden glow lit the bridge. The light ran along the very last steps and then soared toward the Demon Realm's gate with shocking speed. Don't tell me that a divine addition to the gate is worth X amount of regular people. Do not fucking tell me that. Chu Waning's face drained of color, while Shimei's expression of surprise gave way to ecstasy. The martyr's path was almost complete. The bridge between the human and demon realms was finally built. A wizened voice boomed from behind the gate, its tone congratulatory. The martyr's path has received divine sacrifice. You youngsters have taken a life from the tribe of the gods and given it to my road. You have made your intentions clear. The voice was so loud everyone within miles of Xisheng Peak could hear it. All those engaged in battle across the mountain looked toward the backwoods. Jiang Shi's face had gone bloodless. He wasn't alone. Everyone understood that the gate to the demon realm was on the verge of opening. Heavenly retribution is nigh, that languid voice continued. Since you have offered up one of the divine race, His Majesty the Demon Lord will waive the last 29 steps as a show of his great mercy. The gate to the demon realm shall open and allow you to return home. We're 8 minutes past 4 fucking o'clock. This is around the time we take a break. I am going to go find something to hit that is not part of my house. I'll return in just a few minutes. We are indeed in the middle of a scene. This is absolutely fucking cruel of me. It really is. You should be angry. I gotta walk this one off, however. We're around the middle of page 134, and I'll be back in just a few minutes. Please feel free to hang out in the break room and scream while I'm gone. And give the stream a like if you're fucking pissed. I'll be right back. We're back. We are on page 134. Pretty much right smack dead in the middle. And before we pick it back up, I would like to thank Meat Bun, actually, because, oh crap. Hang on. Are we frozen? It's frozen on my end, too. Can you still hear me? Yeah? Yeah? You can hear me? Okay. Hold, please. I can end the stream on my end without ending it on y'all's end. So hang on. I'll just reboot real quick. One moment. Come on. Come on. Come on. We're encouraging it now. Everybody fucking hold hands. Can you see me? My stream screen loading thing is still like buffering. I got nothing that I can see, but that doesn't mean that you can't see me. As long as you can see and hear me, that's the important part. Okay, now it's starting to catch up with itself. All right. Anyway, so sorry. Once again, we were on page 134, and now that you can both see me and hear me, I am going to get out my thanks to Meat Bun, because in one fell fucking swoop, she has reminded me of one of my favorite and potentially the most important recurring idea in the Hunger Games, and I've cited it many times before, and I will cite it forever because it's correct, that says, remember who the real enemy is. And my entire, perspective has been gut checked. Because this motherfucker, he could just do it. Basically. And he is instead exploiting an already exploited people to his own ends. He's the billionaire of this piece. The corporate billionaire motherfucker. He's the real enemy. What? The mountain exploded with panicked shouts. Master Ma of Taobao Estate. She did not. She did not. You see, she knows. She knows. I need to have conversations with this woman. She fucking knows. Master Ma of Taobao Estate sat down on the ground and burst into tears. Heavens above, what do we do? Others had turned gray with fright, legs shaking. Heavenly retribution is nigh. What heavenly retribution? What does that mean? Shui Meng and the Mei twins, still battling Taishan Jun, started in surprise. The instant Shui Meng's concentration wavered, Taishan Jun threw off his bindings and leapt up. That's what we needed! The backlash of spiritual energy nearly knocked Shui Meng off his feet. His chest constricted and he vomited a mouthful of blood. At the sound of retching, Taishan Jun turned back to stare at Shui Meng. Confusion flooded his scarlet eyes. Memories swirled through his mind once more as the souls within him clamored for dominance. Shui Meng. Mei Honshui drew the long sword Shofeng and stepped in front of his brother and Shui Meng. Watch out, he warned. But Taishan Jun didn't attack. His brows were knit tightly, his face a mask of pain. No, what's going on here? What is this? A wordless cry tore from his throat, furious and bewildered. All composure lost, he shot off toward the dark backwoods. No, motherfucker! Stay here! Starting to lose it. Starting to... we were... Only when Taishan Jun was out of sight did Mei Honshui let down his guard and return to the other two. How are you doing? He asked Shui Meng. Don't worry about me. Find Shizun. Tell him about the spells we set up. Mei Honshui took hold of Shui Meng's wrist and shook his head. Your spiritual core is about to break. We have to treat you first. Go! Shui Meng roared. Why don't I go ahead? You two stay here. No, you don't split the party! You don't split the party. If you ever play Dungeons and Dragons, rule number fucking 1 is you don't split the party. It's been 2 years of reading Erha. I've probably said this before. I don't care. You don't split the... They couldn't afford a delay. He pointed at Shui Meng. Ge, help him get his energy under control. I'll fight Chu Zongshe. I can't believe I can't rest on that. Ge. I have to just keep going. The last steps of the martyr's path had materialized, linking the human and demon realms at last. The crowd of butterfly-boned beauty feasts trembled, their expressions rapt. None dared to step forward first. Even Shimei was motionless. Time seemed to come to a standstill. Perhaps only a fraction of a second passed. Perhaps it was a sickeningly long wait. The gate began to vibrate with a low rumble. Fog billowed out and whipping winds rose. Heaven and earth seemed to take a great gasping breath. Why do I suddenly... Why? You know, here's a question. I really can't be stopping so much. Here's a question. Why on this planet in this timeline, and by that I mean Earth and ours, why are we counting on the Demon Lord keeping his word? Why are we doing that? Why am I doing that? Why have I been sitting here the whole being like, surely that's the deal. And someone called the Demon Lord wouldn't be fucky about it, would they? No. A fissure ran down the middle of the extravagantly carved gate, and dazzling scarlet light burst from the gap. Chu Wanning felt an unfamiliar energy surge, terrifyingly malevolent. Such was the power of the race that could master the three great forbidden techniques. The demon realm lay before their eyes. It's the end of the chapter. What? We're on page 137 for chapter 306, which is called But Not of My Blood. But not blood of my blood. I just blacked out there for a second. But not blood of my blood. What? This is one of those times where I don't know. I don't know. Sometimes she gives you a little bit of enough to, hang on that you're like, okay, I see where this is going. And then sometimes she does that and then she's like, but it doesn't apply to the person or situation that you thought of. And then sometimes you're just like, what? It's one of those times. Don't float that idea, Henry. I won't even speak that out loud. The world flashed dark. Demonic energy shot forth like an arrow splitting the clouds, rushing straight toward the formless space-time gate in the distance. The storm that had raged for more than 10 days cleared, and the rain crashing down from the heavens vanished in the blink of an eye. One hopeful onlooker piped up through trembling lips. What's going on? No one replied. Everyone was gazing fixedly in the direction of the space-time gate. Yet that gaping black maw stretching over half the horizon remained unchanged. They waited with bated breath, hearts pounding. Nothing was happening. Still nothing. The rain stopped. Is that a good thing? It was probably a false alarm. I think everything's okay. Across the crowd, breaths were exhaled and tensed faces relaxed. Yet a moment later, the ground quaked beneath their feet. What was that? When they looked up again, the space-time gate was expanding at a dizzying rate. The dark chasm swallowed the lingering rain clouds, then ripped open across the heavens. Mouth agape, they watched as a blazing scarlet phoenix burst from the rift, its massive wings blocking out the sky as it soared overhead. Its eyes were like mountain lakes, its talons like towering peaks, each of its feathers 100 yards long. 100 yards long. 300, fucking words. Units of measurement. Each of its feathers 100 yards long. Clouds raced across the sky, and forests were torn from the earth with a flap of its wings. As it shot toward the distant Kunlun mountain, the thick snow melted and icicles were blown to dust. With a keening screech, the creature alighted on the mountain's summit. The cry that issued from its throat was identical to the whistle that sounded when the space-time gate opened and closed. Oh! That's what the sound has been the whole fucking time. Sure, why not? This is... Cultivators began to exclaim from the crowd. The primordial phoenix. That's the primordial phoenix. This legendary beast, so ancient even the oldest painted scrolls contained no depictions of it, had in the past come into the service of Gochen the Exalted. The primordial phoenix possessed earth-shattering might. It could ascend to the highest heavens faster than lightning and soar farther than the light of dawn. The primordial phoenix was the guardian of the space-time gate all along, Chu Wanning said weakly. In fact, the space-time gate of life and death, created by Gochen the Exalted as one of the three great forbidden techniques, worked by opening the enclosure in the void to which the primordial phoenix was confined. When the caster stepped into the portal, the phoenix asked them where and when they wanted to go, then took them across space and time into the past or the future. Yet this creature was so enormous and swift that those within the portal never caught sight of the beast. They only heard its call as they arrived at their destination. The phoenix perched atop Kunlun Mountain, red gold eyes swiveling as it scanned the world below. It spoke in low, grave tones, like a massive bell's toll. You have defied the order of the mortal realm. The heavens shall render their judgment. The beast took to the air again, 9 golden tail feathers fanning out across the sky. With each flap of its wings, the peaks and hills of the mortal realm quaked and crumbled. It would have been a sight to behold, if only its coming didn't herald the apocalypse. Fall back, Chuaning shouted. His voice was joined by a chorus of others, the leaders and elders of nearly every sect. Fall back, fall back. Seeking survival was instinctual. No one needed further persuasion. Like a swarm of ants, the cultivators fled on their swords before the colossal, primordial phoenix. Mei Han Shui had finally arrived at Chuaning's side. Brushing his windswept hair out of his eyes, he said, Zongsha, please help them retreat to the edge of the space-time gate. Before Chuaning could ask why, Mei Han Shui continued, this world's been doomed for ages. For the past 8 years, the two of us in Shuimeng have tried to think of ways to minimize the destruction to come on this day. Ever since the two worlds were linked, we've been setting up a Xuanwu armor barrier array next to the portal. This armor was a piece of shell shed by the Xuanwu, the ebon tortoise, a mythic creature as ancient as the primordial phoenix. Xuanwu armor, when used as the foundation for a protective barrier, could strengthen it 1,000-fold. But according to legend, this armor was found only in the most remote and treacherous reaches of the East Sea. What bitter trials had this lifetime's Mei twins and Shuimeng endured to acquire such an artifact? Zongsha, please lead everyone to the gate so that they can return to their original world. He paused. This calamity originated in this world. It's only right that it ends here, too. In the distance, the primordial phoenix had taken flight again. With a swish of its red gold tail, huge plumes of snow curled up from Kunlun. The beast transformed into a beam of scarlet light that shot into the distance faster than the eye could see. In an instant, rivers rushed backward, and the ocean swelled into towering walls of water. It was as though the tides had been dredged from the depths of the sea and were surging toward the earth at a murderous speed. The crest of those great waves brushed the heavens, and then the waters descended upon the land. Chuaning had begun to draw back when he realized the flood was encroaching far faster than the cultivators could flee on their swords. In the space of a few breaths, the waters were close enough to see. In another moment, they would be at the heels of the retreating crowd. He made a quick decision. You and Shuimeng get everyone to safety. I'll stay here and buy us some time. Chuaning activated the rising dragon talisman once more and soared into the sky. Tian Wen, he cried. 10,000 coffins. Willow vines burst from the ground below. Chuaning bit open a fingertip and let a drop of blood fall. Barricades. Rise. The vines and shoots converged, winding and weaving into a towering thicket. Juga. Light flared in his palm, and Juga appeared atop the vines. Chuaning plucked at the strings, and the melody streamed into the skies and wreathed the wall of vines in brilliant gold, willow and music merging into a solid and impenetrable wall. By the time he finished, the floodwaters were upon them. The first enormous wave ricocheted off the wall in a shower of spray. Chuaning tilted his head toward Mei Han Shui. Go, quickly. This turn of events had taken even Mei Han Shui by surprise. Though his chest burned with anxiety, there was nothing to do but respectfully cup his hands at Chuaning and vanish behind the dense thicket of vines. The army of cultivators continued to retreat as Chuaning poured all his strength into countering the flood. The tempestuous waters roared as they crashed against Tianwen and Juga's barricade. On the martyr's path, the crack in that infernal door was slowly widening before the wrapped, butterfly-boned beauty feasts. The crimson and violet clouds of the demon realm were serene as they floated out into the mortal world's frantic chaos. At last, the gate was finally open. I thought there might be a procedure for the gate to open, but no, just something comes with the gate opening. That is in itself disastrous. All right. Shimei, standing at the very front of the group, was the first to bathe in the pure energy of the demon race. Shivers raced down his spine and his limbs tingled, then relaxed. Without thinking, he took a deep breath. The shriveled spiritual core within his chest swelled, reinvigorated by the wash of demonic energy. The power of the demon race was coursing through his body. So this was what it felt like to be strong. Finally, he understood. He knew this sensation at last. His eyes glittered, rapturous, his lovely features suffused with an atavistic glee. The last thing we fucking needed was for this weak-ass, small-dick motherfucking bitch to get his hands on power that he can wield himself. His reaction was mirrored by all his fellow clan members behind him. The spiritual cores of these butterfly-bone beauty feasts had always been feeble for lack of demonic energy. Now, those who had been frail so long received the strength that should have always been their due. Eventually, the stooped figure of a man with neat hair and white-streaked whiskers appeared in the doorway. His red eyes swept across the crowd, and his puckered face scrunched in a grin. I've been posted here for 4,000 years. All the previous gatekeepers have been gone for ages. None of them ever saw any butterfly-bone beauty feasts accomplish what you lot have. He leaned heavily on his cane, looking pleased. All right. You've made the heavenly realm your enemy and emerged victorious. Very good, very good. The old demon glanced at the mortal realm disintegrating behind him, and his smile widened to reveal stained yellow teeth. He turned to make way for the butterfly-bone clan members to pass. This old man offers you a warm welcome home, he said in a quavering voice. The waters were lapping at the sky behind him, but so what? That was the business of the mortal realm. It had nothing to do with demons. Shimei glanced back at Chu Wanning, still struggling to contain the apocalyptic flood, this singular mortal who dared to strive against the heavens. Was it courage, or was it naivete? But perhaps it was precisely Chu Wanning's unique brand of naivete that had once stirred Shimei's heart. Even as he stood on the threshold of another world, Shimei found himself remembering the Yuheng elder walking him home as a child beneath his umbrella. At the foot of Naiha Bridge, they'd encountered a wriggling earthworm. Chu Wanning had glanced at the creature as they passed and waved his sleeve. A tendril of gold curled around the little worm and deposited it carefully back into the grass. Elder, what is the purpose of this? It was in the way, said Chu Wanning, face neutral. It was, of course, a silly excuse. The young Shimei laughed. This elder is very kind. But the ground gets waterlogged when it rains. Won't the worm just crawl out again in a little while? Then it'll end up blocking the elder's way again. Chu Wanning's footsteps slowed, a tiny furrow appearing on his smooth brow. I never thought about that. He looked down at Shimei. You know quite a lot about these things. Shimei offered him a shy smile. Earthworms are often used in medicine, so I'm somewhat familiar with their behavior. The things I know aren't all that useful, really. The two of them walked on. But although Chu Wanning was now informed about the habits of earthworms, Shimei found that he still moved aside every one they came across on the path. Eventually, despite his incredulous amusement, Shimei bent down to help. Chu Wanning glanced at the thick boots in Shimei's arms as he awkwardly crouched around them. There's no need. But they're blocking the elder's way, Shimei said warmly. He turned to look at Chu Wanning through the misty rain. This disciple will help them behave. Chu Wanning shook his head. He stepped closer to Shimei and raised the paper umbrella over him. Stop running around. You're getting wet. The disciples' quarters weren't far, but the walk was long enough that it would be an awkward journey if they didn't speak at all. As they strode side by side, Shimei asked, Elder, are you always so good? There was a moment of silence. Chu Wanning cast his gaze to the ground, phoenix eyes haughty. Good. Since when? Shimei, clever as he was, had by now realized the Yuheng elder was not so cold and indifferent as the rumors claimed. Even when the elder knows something to be fruitless, you do it anyway. Chu Wanning walked on without a word. Shimei had resigned himself to making the rest of the journey in silence when Chu Wanning finally spoke up. Let's say you pass a beggar on the road. Whatever money you give them probably won't make a real difference to their circumstances. Does that mean you shouldn't give them anything? It was Shimei's turn to go quiet. Let's say you pass a spiritual beast, injured by hunters. Even if you help it, it might get caught again soon after you return it to the forest. Should you ignore it and do nothing? Shimei lowered his long, soft lashes. This disciple understands what the elder means, he said agreeably. Thank you for taking the time to explain. Do you, though? Fucking do you? Because I don't think you... The child's equanimity left Chu Wanning a bit embarrassed. He cleared his throat. But when it comes to earthworms, they're really just in the way. Nothing more. Shimei blinked, then looked up at Chu Wanning. His expression was stern, yet the tips of his ears were faintly red. Shimei suddenly found him adorable. He pressed his lips together, then said in a voice like liquid silk, This elder is so good. I'm sure you show such compassion for all living creatures. He paused, then asked abruptly, You know, there's something I read today that I don't fully understand, but I don't have a shizin to ask. Elder, may this disciple trouble you for your insight. Grateful for the chance to move on from the unbearably earnest subject of saving lives, Chu Wanning nodded. Go ahead. Guyue's medicinal texts are extensive, and many of their formulations have stunned this disciple. The one I found most baffling was a miracle drug that fortifies the spiritual core. After taking this drug, one can... For some reason, Chu Wanning's face darkened. You want this drug? He interrupted. Does the elder know the one I'm referring to? Some years ago, this drug was quite popular throughout the cultivation realm. Sects large and small tried to buy it from the medicine masters. Chu Wanning's eyes narrowed. Of course I know it. He passed the test. He did. He passed the test. That's what happened. He passed the test. Yep. Yeah. Shimei took in this reaction, then replied, This disciple is not interested in acquiring the drug. But I saw that one of the ingredients is the flesh of a butterfly bone beauty feast. I don't think I fully understand. Should members of the butterfly bone clan be considered humans or beasts? Chu Wanning didn't hesitate for a moment. Sword-like brows drawn low, he solemnly answered this inquisitive disciple, They're human. He didn't say they should be considered humans. Rather, he immediately asserted, They're human. Before Shimei could reply, Chu Wanning glanced at the medicinal text in his arms and took it from him. Elder. The ethics of Guyue's medical scholarship are complex. This is unsuitable material for a new student. Tomorrow, go to the library and borrow the Tenlong Elder's writings. That would be more appropriate. Shimei hung his head. This disciple can only borrow books in the outer rooms of the library. The ones deeper in, all require express permission from one's teacher. Chuaning stilled. This boy had joined the sect some time ago, but because his aptitude for cultivation was weak, even the laid-back Xuanji elder refused to accept him as a disciple. In the wind-blown drizzle, Chuaning untied a fine jade token from his waist. Take this. Shimei's eyes widened. If anyone asks, show them my token, Chuaning advised. Be discerning with your reading material. It won't do to go down the wrong path, all because you read the wrong books. Shimei wanted to take the jade token politely with both hands, but he was carrying too many books. It would be too disrespectful to snatch the token one-handed. He stood frozen, a flush rising over his face and ears. Chuaning got down on one knee, bringing his eyes level with the boy next to him. Lashes downcast, he fastened the token at Shimei's waist. His face remained impassive, just as it had been when he moved the worms blocking his way. No other elder would ever have given their personal library token to an unfamiliar disciple. It was against the rules. But Chuaning clearly wasn't someone who lived by the rules. Okay. Once the token was tied securely on Shimei's belt, Chuaning got to his feet and let his hands, lightly calloused from constantly fixing automatons, fall to his side. Let's go. The young Shimei sucked in a deep breath, though he didn't quite know why, only that he feared if he didn't, whatever emotion had rushed into his chest would make him burst into tears. Kindness will do that to you. Somehow, he felt wounded. He'd never been treated fairly, whether as a butterfly-bone beauty feast or as a disciple with paltry spiritual energy. He hadn't really minded before. He'd been used to it. To him, all these people amounted to nothing more than vile butchers anyway. Thank you to that landing plane for interrupting me but giving me a moment to fucking breathe. But now, someone had looked him in the eye and told him, butterfly-bone beauty feasts are human. Someone had stopped and given him this token, one with which teachers might not even trust their direct disciples, all so he wouldn't go down the wrong path. There's art of this. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I suppose this counts as a consequential moment. Perhaps. His battered, hardened heart ached unbearably, and for the first time he felt aggrieved. It had been so painful to bottle up his feelings for so long. Even if he appeared gentle and considerate, it was merely a mask he'd forged in the wake of the peril that had pursued him throughout his life. He hid behind it, using kindness as a shield, as a battlement. He appeared kinder and more biddable than anyone, but in truth his heart was impenetrable to all. His breast was crammed full of the Butterfly Bones clan's hatred. There was no room for anything else. But when he got back to his room that day, as he wrote a formal request for a teacher, each stroke of his brush held a rare sincerity. When he finished, he put down the shabby bamboo brush and gazed at the pooling candle wax. Throughout his life, he'd known the desire for vengeance and the longing to return home. It felt like something new had joined those bitter emotions, a wisp of unexpected joy. Such joy might endanger him, but back then he'd thought this bit of affection harmless, incapable of influencing his grandest ambitions. Now, as he stood before the demon realm, Shimei turned back to look at the source of that affection. He still wasn't sure what it was he felt. Anger? Sorrow? Maybe it wasn't as simple as that. couldn't name it, so he didn't know how to act upon it. Well, I'll tell you, maybe a way that you don't act upon it is you take the guy who was genuinely kind to you and unflinchingly confirmed the humanity of your people. What you don't do is then try to turn him into your puppet bitch to bring about a fucking apocalypse and force him to murder thousands of people. You maybe don't do that. Not that you have any idea how to express positive emotions given your background and upbringing, but pro tip, you don't do that to people who are nice to you. Where the fuck am I? There I am. Shimei hesitated, then said with a touch of derision, Shizun, look. Everyone struggles against their fate for as long as they can. No matter who, whether you or I, whether men or demons, we're alike. He did not just pull out the we're alike, you and I. He did not. We are, He spoke softly, and Chu Wanning stood too high in the sky to hear. But as the words fell from his lips, a pressure seemed to ease in Shimei's heart. He turned toward that infernal entrance to the demon realm. 1,000 butterfly-bone beauty feasts followed him, walking toward the gate. They were going home. The old demon guarding the gate greeted Shimei with great decorum, having recognized him as the leader. As Shimei stepped over the threshold, the guard bowed deeply. Gongja, a moment, please. What is it? Status in the demon realm is determined by bloodline. Gongja, now that you're coming home, we must first check your ancestral origins. Aren't all butterfly-bone beauty feasts descended from the maternal line of Gochen the Exalted? Shimei asked impassively. What is there to check? The line of Gochen the Exalted has long been expunged from the registry of the demon realm. When you and your followers enter, we must examine what other bloodlines have mixed into your ancestry. Shimei frowned. He turned back to glance at Chu Wanning, still holding out alone, though who knew for how much longer, and the 1,000-odd people waiting behind him. Despite his irritation with the guard's request, Shimei nodded. Quickly then. The old demon waved his hand, and a scepter topped with the leering beast's head appeared in his grip. He mouthed an incantation. 100 ribbons of red light floated out of the beast's mouth and wrapped around Shimei like a bolt of brocade. Bai, Chung, Shi, Zhou. The guard muttered aloud, the surnames glimmering upon each of the ribbons. What's all this? Shimei asked. Your lineage, the old demon answered. The ribbon corresponding to the demon family that best matches your ancestry will wrap itself around your wrist. Shimei fell silent, dipping his head to watch the glowing bands of light. Qin, Fei, Aoyang, Shangguan, Zhangli, Lo, Ye, Duan, Chu. The guard continued to recite names. Still, none of the ribbons settled. He frowned and looked up at Shimei's face. Shimei looked back at him, unruffled. When their gazes met, the guard chuckled, then began muttering more quickly than before. Finally, one of the ribbons encircled Shimei's wrist. He coolly raised his hand to examine it. Is this the one? Which surname is it? He turned his wrist over, but before he could read the name, the ribbon withered and blackened, disintegrating into dust. Shimei was silent. So, too, was the guard. He stared at Shimei in mute disbelief. Shimei raised his gaze a fraction. He had an inkling as to where this was going, but he nevertheless showed the guard a serene smile. What's wrong? The demon's wizened face had gone dark. He snarled. A descendant of the gods? Shimei paused, then let out a scornful snort. He brushed the dust off his wrist with deliberate nonchalance. Yes, my father was indeed a descendant of the gods, but so what? He said smoothly. I've never raised so much as a finger to help the gods. My sole mission in life has been to help our demon clan return home. Surely you won't brand me as defiant simply because a few drops of dirty blood flow through my veins. That would be far too... He was still speaking when a black gale whirled up around the guard. Shimei took an involuntary step back. When the gale subsided, the old demon had vanished. In his place was a monstrous skeleton brandishing an equally enormous hatchet, fangs bared. He hurled the hatchet into the ground, blocking the path forward for all the butterfly-boned beauty feasts. Then he tipped his head skyward and let out a fearsome bellow. Gods and demons have never been permitted to fraternize. Your blood is tainted with filth, the skeleton roared. The martyr's path will not open to you. Leave the demon realm. Scram, shut the gate. The two halves of the gate rumbled, drawing inexorably back toward the center. At the far end of the bridge, where it touched Sishung Peak, there was a dull roar like the slide of an avalanche. The completed bridge had begun to crumble. That's the end of the chapter. Really quick, while I process, one day I will remember to write down in front of me which chapters we're reading today. Today is not that day. If somebody could confirm whether or not I'm reading chapter 307, that would be lovely. I think so. I've said it a couple times on this stream. We are. Okay. Good. Just taking a deep breath. Deep breath. I have a slight question as to why all of the beauty feasts were judged based on the blood of one of them. But that's a fleeting question and something that was clearly designed to just not be fair. And in fact, we were told, weren't we, that there are no pure blood fucking beauty feasts left. Correct? Yeah. 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 There's also, and I can't remember specifically what it was, but there was indeed it's a part of, I think, American history. So this is an unintentional correlation for sure. But there was indeed something, I wish I could remember the details, back in our lovely, lovely history, where indeed, like, even a few drops, I think this was a racial thing. I think this was a thing, racism against black people specifically. I think there was a whole thing at one point with a few drops of blood essentially being too many. That reminds me of this. Thank you, Vase of Peonies. The 3/5 rule. Thank you. Yeah. We're on page 153 for chapter 307, which is called The Twilight of the Bat. Remember who the real fucking enemy is. What's going on? The butterfly-boned clan members at the back of the crowd anxiously craned their necks to see what had transpired. Chuaning's barricades, stout as they were like heaped sand before the amassed waters. Juga's barrier was first to splinter, water trickling through the woven willow vines. Alarmed, the butterfly-boned beauty feasts jostled toward the front. What happened? They yelled. Why won't they let us in? One of them looked over their shoulder and paled. The martyr's path is collapsing. What? The clan was hemmed in on all sides. Before them, the gate to the demon realm was closing. Behind them, the bridge was falling apart. Beneath their feet was a fathomless abyss. There was nowhere for them to flee. Panic took hold of the crowd. Shimei yelled over the fray, "Everyone, come forward, stay calm." Huazongsha. A sound-amplifying technique brought Shimei's words to the ears of every last member of the crowd. "I promised, I will bring you all home." This was the goal he'd chased over 2 lifetimes, his mother's most cherished wish. Now that they'd come this far, he refused to cede an inch. "Well, I've got news for you, then." "But Zongsha, how can we fight this demon guard?" Shimei turned back to look at his people. The light of the apocalypse reflected in his pale brown eyes. "We couldn't have done it in the past, but what about now?" The frightened butterfly-bone beauty feasts realized with a start. The demonic chi emanating from the gate had restored the demon race's spiritual energy to their bodies. "All of you, stand behind me. Gather together and try to slow down the disintegration of the martyr's path. What about you, Zongsha?" Shimei glanced up at the hatchet-wielding skeleton. "I'm going to defeat him." The skeleton launched himself at Shimei with a roar. "You think defeating the guy at the door, you think taking out the bouncer is going to make you any more welcome in this realm? He's desperate and his psyche is breaking, we understand. However, you can take out all the bouncers you want." The skeleton launched himself at Shimei with a roar. "Zongsha, watch out!" Shimei was unfazed. Demonic chi suffused his body. Never before had he felt such bountiful energy coursing through him. He stepped forward, fearless. The butterfly-bone beauty feasts were supposed to be powerful, yet because of one person's betrayal, they'd endured injustice for thousands of years. His eyes flashed with hatred. Flames burst from his palms. He hurled them toward the skeleton. The skeleton twisted aside, and the fireball struck the gate, scorching a black mark into it. "Traitor, you dare disobey us!" "How is it my fault that blood flows through my veins?" Shimei raged. "Because I share the blood of Gochen's line, I was banished to the mortal realm, lucky to form even a feeble core. Because I share the blood of the gods, I'm turned away at your door, denied my homecoming. What have I done wrong? What have the butterfly-bone beauty feasts done wrong? Whom have I betrayed?" The skeleton repeated forebodingly. "Traitor, you dare disobey." The flow of energy into the butterfly-bone beauty feasts was like a monk invoking the name of the Buddha, like a clay statue gilded and burnished to a shine, something formerly insubstantial given ineffable power. Up in the sky, Chuaning was straining to contain the floodwaters. Nearly all the other cultivators had retreated behind the Xuanwu barrier to the junction between the 2 worlds. Before the gate, Shimei and the demonic skeleton were locked in ferocious combat. Everyone had to shoulder their own missions, make their own choices. No matter what strife had once been between them, no time remained for last disputes. As the final reckoning drew nigh, the same determination was etched across all their faces. No matter how weak I may be, I refuse to stand back and do nothing. "Zongsha, the path has collapsed. We can't hold out for much longer." Many of the younger butterfly-boned began to weep in terrified despair. The whipping wind dragged the sobbing to Shimei's ears like it had all those years ago, when he had rammed his slight body against that ice-cold stone door in Tianyin Pavilion. When that door had opened, he saw his father, blood dripping from his mouth, and his mother, torn limb to limb. He heard his mother crying out. He heard his mother crying out as she dragged her gore-drenched body along the ground. "Run!" she'd screamed at Shimei, her final warning tearing from her throat. "Run now! Run, get away from here. Run, find a place that will take us in at last. Bring everyone with you, all your persecuted kin. This is my final wish, the dream for which I've sold my body and soul and given my life. Run, please. How have I let down the demonic race? How? It was Shimei's last question, but he didn't expect an answer. He leapt up, darting around the enormous hatchet as it swung downward. Graceful as a kite, he touched down on the skeleton's shoulder and dropped to his knees, grabbing the monster's swiveling skull. The surface below them swayed with growing severity as the bridge of Genlong Ponds continued to fall away. Corpses tumbled into the yawning abyss, landing too far below to hear. Shimei glanced over and saw his clanspeople crowded together, pooling their newly acquired demonic energy to slow down the bridge's disintegration as much as possible. They were pure-blooded butterfly-bone beauty feasts, a flock of birds winging back to their nest. But what about him? Did we not just say there were no pure blood? Well, he's the only one with divine blood going on. That's true. Within a lightless abyss, a bat's leathery wings beat fruitlessly. Shimei's palm ignited with a chilling light. A thorny vine unfurled, scintillating with demonic energy. Shimei swung the vine, lashing the demon skeleton squarely in the forehead. What exactly was a bat? A bird soaring through the heavens, or a beast huddled in the darkness? Perhaps neither side would claim him. His blood was dirty. No matter where he went, he would be considered a traitor. The skeleton swayed for a suspended moment, then crashed to the ground. Its bones collapsed into dust, then vanished like smoke on the wind. The gate to the demon realm was now open barely a crack. Shimei alighted on the ground and bounded back into the air toward the gate. He wedged his body between the two leaves of engraved stone. He turned toward the confused, tearful butterfly-boned beauty feasts below him. Why are you all just standing there? He snapped. Run! Run. Run. Huagui's last cry seemed to cut through the darkness, just as heart-rending as it had been 20 years before. Hanan, run! Shimei closed his eyes. He could see the flesh of her arm torn open, the broken bones of her leg. His mother writhed and flailed in a spreading pool of blood, struggling like a felled beast. She grabbed her husband's leg, trying to give her child a chance to escape. Run, run now, don't turn around, don't come back. The man's heel came down on her face. Blood splattered. In her last moments, she summoned all her strength to whimper, Run. With a crisp crack, his heel crushed her throat. Shimei gnashed his teeth, channeling demonic energy into his limbs. His joints strained and popped as he braced himself between the doors, forcing the portal to the demon realm to remain open. He looked below. His brow was sheened with sweat, and blood trickled from his bitten lips. He trembled violently, his bones on the verge of shattering. The inward movement of the doors had slowed, but the force behind them hadn't lessened a bit. Imperious, without mercy, they bore down on his body of flesh and blood. 1 inch. 2. 1 foot. 2 feet. His veins bulged, and his face flushed crimson, but his eyes remained fixed on the crowd streaming past beneath him. Run, he croaked. This is italicized, not spoken out loud. Faster, as fast as you can. I said I'd bring you home. My hands are covered in blood. Everyone curses my name. I trespassed against my teacher, and my friends have forsaken me. I've committed every manner of evil to forge this path. But I'm no traitor. His bones were about to snap, but he strained to hold those colossal doors open. How laughable. He was like an ant trying to hold up the sky, a mayfly trying to shake a tree. A great rumble echoed in his ears. With effort, Shimei raised his dripping face and lifted sodden lashes to squint in the direction of the sound. He saw Chu-Wan-Ning, pummeled by towering waves. Tianwen and Zhuge's barricade had splintered. As their master tumbled out of the sky, the wall he'd toiled to maintain broke apart in seconds. A huge wave knocked Chu-Wan-Ning into the flood. Shizin! The water, now unobstructed, crashed toward the juncture between the two worlds. Waves leveled buildings and mountains, and the tide filled valleys and ravines. In the blink of an eye, the roiling waves had swallowed the earth. The mortal realm was irrevocably changed. There was no going back. The crush of the demon gate was overwhelming. Shimei could feel his joints dislocating, but he had no more spiritual energy left. He choked up a mouthful of blood and glanced downward. There were still a dozen people waiting to pass through. He couldn't have said where he got the strength, but he let out a roar, eyes bulging, tendons standing out from his neck. He braced his hands and feet against the doors, threatening to crush him with inexorable force. Huazongsha! The butterfly bone beauty feasts who'd fled into the demon realm lingered close to the gate, crowding together and gazing up at Shimei. But he couldn't see their faces clearly anymore. His vision was dim and hazy. 8 more. 5. 3. A wild grin, ecstatic yet spiteful, unfolded across his agonized features. Blood dripped from his lips, dyeing his teeth scarlet. Once again, italicized. What of fate and destiny? What of gods and demons? You thought you could keep me out. You thought you could strike down my life's work, but no. There's nothing that can prevail over a heart hard as iron, a body steadfast as stone. The very last one. Run! Shimei laughed in triumph. Who said a mayfly couldn't shake a tree? As long as they steeled themselves, even ants could breach a dam. He'd done it, hadn't he? The two halves of the gate collided with a dull boom. His vision filled with interlacing red and black, the red of blood, the black of night. He was a bat, trapped between them, and the last thing that reached his ears was a crisp, hair-raising crack. Was it the sound of his skull shattering? Or was it an echo from his childhood, as his mother's neck snapped underfoot? Huazongsha! Zongsha! As the gate rumbled shut, the butterfly bone beauty feasts began to wail from the other side, cut off from their former world. The gate to the demon realm was splashed with bright blood, and Hua Binan's severed limbs tumbled from the seam. The next huge wave crashed down, dashing away the martyr's path built from thousands of corpses. When the wave subsided, the demon gate was gone. Xisheng Peak was next to succumb to the maelstrom. The heaven-piercing tower collapsed, the Red Lotus Pavilion was obliterated. What was once Loyalty Hall disappeared beneath the waves in a shower of broken tile. Chu-Wan-Ning choked on mouthfuls of water, gasping for air. He tried fruitlessly to summon Huaisha, but his spiritual energy was depleted. Another huge wave crested and broke, knocking the wind out of him. A piece of driftwood shoved him beneath the surface. His features contorted in desperation, but he couldn't breathe, couldn't grab anything to stay afloat. His white robes rippled, dark hair tangling between the waves. He was sinking, sinking. Everything slowly dimmed around him. He was suffocating. He could feel his consciousness flickering. Shuimeng and the others should have made it to the other side of Xuanwu Barrier by now. But what if anything were to go wrong after that? And what about Mo-Run? Mo-Run. He opened his eyes in the frigid waters. The light from the sky was so far away. A trail of fine bubbles floated from his lips. Dazed, he tilted his face upward. Perhaps because he was on the verge of drowning, a vision took shape before him. An ink-dark silhouette knifed through the depths. When the figure drew closer, he made out a familiar face. Eyes so dark they gleamed purple, and the lattice of cuts and scrapes covering his features. Marks from his failed attempt to destroy this corpse. Chu Wanning squeezed his eyes shut. He had really been too cruel. Surely this was his retribution. Even his dying hallucination tormented him. "I'm sorry," he wanted to say. His lips opened and closed, but only a stream of bubbles poured out. Suddenly a hand reached out and grabbed him, and Chu Wanning found himself pressed firmly to a broad chest. Though not a hint of warmth lingered there, the red-hot ferocity emanating from this man threatened to boil the water around him. Chu Wanning. Someone was calling his name. Wanning! He was hazily aware of another mouth pressed to his. Cool lips opened against his own, channeling a thread of spiritual energy into him. Bugwe. A jade-green blur cut through the water. The man grabbed the glowing blade, which yanked them upward. Hardly a moment later, they surfaced with a loud splash. Chu Wanning, always sensitive to the cold, was soaked to the bone and shaking. His lips were gray and bloodless as he gulped air into his burning lungs. It took him a few breaths to realize what had happened. When he did, his head jerked up. He found himself gazing into a pair of dark, dewy eyes. No longer scattered and confused, but sharp and clear. Mo Run was breathing heavily too. His lips parted and slightly wet. His sodden black robes were plastered to his muscular chest. He stared down at Chu Wanning without a word. Who was this? A puppet or a living person? Taishan Jun or Mo Zongsha? Chu Wanning swallowed around a lump in his throat. He was at a loss for words. His throat bobbed soundlessly. Just as he was about to speak, a drop of seawater slid down his forehead and landed in his eyes. He squinched them shut, their corners reddening. The man pulled him into an embrace amidst the rocking waves, pressing cool lips to the crown of his head. This venerable one was late. Chu Wanning didn't know what to say. Hua Binan's bonds are broken. No one can control this venerable one anymore. He kissed Chu Wanning's forehead and eyelashes, still breathless from the urgency of his dive. Taishan Jun watched Chu Wanning's eyes slowly open again and reached up to caress his hair. He cast his gaze over the floodwaters that filled the mortal realm. Come, he said, his voice slow and grave. I'll take you back to your world. That's the end of the chapter. She gave me the slow, excruciating, poetic, suitable death of Shimei, and the reunion between Chu Wanning and Mo Run, literally, back to back. when we come back on Thursday, we'll be on page... That's not the right page at all. I literally just flipped through the... Hold, please. I no longer had control over my physical body, and I completely just fucking left. Hang on, let me get there. Let me get to 308. Hang on, there we are. We'll be on page 163 for chapter 308, which is called Pitching In to Keep the Flood Out. That's where we're stopping for today. There are book chats on Tuesdays and Thursdays that precede these reading streams. Give the stream a like if you had a good time, and subscribe to Gaywatch for more. I'm literally going to end the stream and go and probably burst into tears, but we'll talk about that on Thursday. Thank you for being here. Have a lovely week. And above all, most importantly, take care of yourself.